Greetings and welcome to a journey into the depths of wartime innovation and deception. Today we delve into a daring covert operation beneath the waves, where the fate of an entire convoy hung in the balance. Imagine a silent, cold dawn on March the 27th, 1944, as a German-type VIC submarine, the 960, slices through dark waters, flanked by reinforced Breer vessels and vigilant minesweepers armed with deadly anti-aircraft guns. But beneath this calm surface, an unstoppable storm is brewing. Six British Mosquito aircraft, armed with a secret weapon, a modified 77mm anti-tank gun mounted within their noses, capable of striking targets over a mile away. How could such a ground-based weapon be adapted for aircraft, and what terrifying purpose did it serve? Did the British develop a new kind of aerial artillery to counter the layered German defenses, an innovation born from the same ingenuity that transformed ordinary machinery into a rapid-firing monster? Could these modified mosquitoes, originally intended for reconnaissance, now threaten submerged U-boats from beyond the reach of traditional anti-aircraft guns? How did a company known for producing cigarette machinery become a pioneer in anti-submarine warfare? And what secrets did the first prototype, plagued with violent recoil and structural challenges, hide beneath its formidable shell? All these questions converge on one central point. Is this the ultimate game-changer in maritime warfare, or just another chapter in a deadly game of cat and mouse? In this video, we will uncover the truth behind this extraordinary weapon system, separating fact from fiction, revealing the hidden stories behind the innovation, and exposing the shocking implications of a weapon that could have altered the course of history. The real story begins now. Prepare to dive into the depths where technology, strategy, and stealth collide. On the early morning of March 27, in the year 1944, at precisely 6 o'clock in the morning, Captain Lieutenant Wilhelm Steinberg found himself standing confidently on the bridge of the submarine designated 960. His vessel was a Type 50YC submarine, smoothly navigating the cold, dark waters heading toward the port of La Pallas. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and the quiet tension of clandestine operations unfolding beneath the surface. Surrounding his submarine were two heavily reinforced Breer vessels, their concrete-strengthened hulls standing as formidable sentinels on either flank, providing essential protection against potential surface threats. These vessels acted as a guardian screen, flanking the submarine in a tight formation, while ahead and behind, four vessels classified as M-class minesweepers maintained a vigilant posture, their presence crucial for clearing the path of underwater mines and ensuring the safe passage of the convoy. Each of these sweepers was armed with an array of weaponry, multiple 20mm and 37mm anti-aircraft guns, mounting a formidable defense ready to unleash a barrage of murderous steel in the event of an aerial assault. As dawn approached, the first light of morning cast a faint, misty glow over the scene, illuminating the gleaming barrels of these guns, which stood poised to defend their charge from any enemy aircraft daring to approach. Unbeknownst to Captain Steinberg and his fellow officers, a highly coordinated attack was already underway. Six British Mosquito aircraft, renowned for their speed and versatility, along with two specially modified Setsi aircraft, variants specifically adapted for combat, had initiated their approach from an altitude of 5,000 feet. These agile fighters, masters of aerial warfare, carried within their fuselages powerful 77mm Mullins guns loaded with armor-piercing shells. These shells had been designed to engage targets from a distance beyond the reach of typical German anti-aircraft defenses, making the impending attack all the more deadly. The convoy beneath was moving confidently through the night, buoyed by the principles of a new tactical doctrine championed by Admiral Karl Donat. This doctrine emphasized the importance of grouping submarines with heavily armed escort vessels, creating overlapping fields of anti-aircraft fire that could intercept and destroy attacking aircraft from multiple angles. It was a strategy born out of the bitter lessons learned during the devastating losses suffered in the year 1943, when lone submarines, exposed on the surface, had fallen prey to relentless Allied aircraft attack. The idea was that by positioning escort ships armed with a broad array of anti-aircraft weapons, The Germans hoped to create a near-impregnable shield, forcing enemy planes to risk approaching within perilous ranges to deliver their depth charges or rockets, ranges at which even the most heavily armored coastal aircraft became extremely vulnerable. However, the Allies had been advancing their technology and tactics, and what Steinberg's commanding officers did not realize was that the British had developed a new and formidable weapon specifically designed to counter this sort of layered defense. This innovation involved mounting a modified 77 mm anti-tank gun, originally intended for ground combat, within the nose of their fastest twin-engine fighter bomber, the Mosquito. This adaptation transformed these aircraft into flying artillery platforms capable of engaging targets at distances up to 1,800 yards, far beyond the effective range of German 20 mm anti-aircraft guns, which lost their accuracy beyond 2,000 meters and well outside the tracking envelope of the 37 mm weapons. The genesis of this particular weapon system traced back to the year 1943, when the British Air Ministry recognized a critical need for an effective response to German underwater and aerial defenses. During that period, U-boats such as U-441 began experimenting with more aggressive anti-aircraft tactics, diving with boats like the converted UAC-1, which was heavily armed with quadruple 20 mm flat cannons and a 37 mm gun, creating a formidable floating anti-aircraft platform capable of unleashing a devastating barrage against traditional attack aircraft. Such platforms could force enemy planes to approach within 500 meters to deliver their depth charges or rockets, ranges at which even the most heavily armored coastal command aircraft risked being overwhelmed by concentrated automatic fire. The problem was that conventional defenses were increasingly ineffective due to the growing range and power of enemy aircraft armaments. The British found an unlikely solution in the Mullins Company of Peterborough, a firm mainly known for manufacturing machinery used in cigarette production. For decades, Mullins had specialized in developing sophisticated automatic feeding mechanisms for their production lines. Recognizing the potential crossover of their technology, Desmond Mullins and his engineering team devised a way to adapt this automatic feeding machinery into a revolutionary autoloading system for the British Army's 75 mm QF anti-tank gun. This innovation transformed the manually operated gun into a semi-automatic weapon capable of firing at a rate of 55 rounds per minute. When adapted for aircraft use, however, the design carried the task of mounting a weapon weighing approximately 1,580 pounds, fully equipped and ready for operation, was a formidable engineering challenge, especially considering its placement. The gun's massive barrel projected forward beyond the aircraft's nose, necessitating the complete removal of the standard armament, specifically the 420 mm Hispano cannons that typically adorn the fighter-bomber variant of the aircraft. This significant modification meant sacrificing the usual offensive armament in favor of this larger, more powerful weapon system. As a result, the aircraft was left with only 2 Browning machine guns, each caliber 3,300, intended solely for aiming and defensive purposes rather than for primary attack roles. However, this substantial trade-off gradually revealed its strategic value through rigorous testing. Trials demonstrated that the formidable 57 mm shell fired from this mounted gun possessed remarkable penetrating power. Under test conditions, it was capable of breaching the pressure hulls of submarines lurking beneath approximately 2 feet of water at a range of approximately 4,000 meters. This was a range at which the German gunners' ability to effectively track and engage a fast-moving aircraft was severely limited, well beyond their optimal engagement zone. The potential of this weapon system was clear. It could disable submarines from a safe distance, making it a valuable asset in anti-submarine warfare, especially against the increasingly well-armed and protected U-boat fleets. The first prototype of this modified aircraft, converted from a Mosquito FB Mark VI with the designation HJ732, underwent its initial firing trials in June of 1943 at the de Havilland facilities. During these tests, the test pilot, Pat Fillingham, observed that firing the gun caused the aircraft to buck violently, a response attributable to the intense recoil generated by the large-caliber weapon. The recoil was so powerful that it caused rivets in the forward fuselage to shear away, necessitating significant structural reinforcement. To counteract this, engineers added sturdy reinforcing struts along the fuselage and installed a massive hydraulic buffer beneath the gun mount. This buffer, a large hydraulic cylinder, served to absorb much of the recoil's force, but it also created a noticeable bulge on the aircraft's underside, a distinctive and unmistakable feature indicating the aircraft's heavy armament. Further modifications were implemented to improve survivability and effectiveness. Additional armor plating, totaling roughly 900 pounds, was added around the engines and the cockpit floor. These enhancements aimed to safeguard vital areas of the aircraft from return fire, particularly from the heavily armed submarines it was designed to attack. The increased armor was essential because, as the aircraft moved into a more aggressive anti-submarine role, the risk of being targeted and hit by hostile return fire grew significantly. Squadron leader Tony Phillips, commanding the 248th Squadron, had been engaged in operations over the Bay of Biscay since December of 1943. Initially operating traditional low-level attack aircraft, Phillips and his squadron had begun to adapt to a new tactical environment as German U-boats started sailing in convoy formations, accompanied by surface escort vessels. The old tactics of attacking from low altitude with depth charges became increasingly dangerous, nearly suicidal, given the improved anti-aircraft defenses. The arrival of newer variants of the aircraft in March of 1944 revolutionized their approach. These variants enabled the squadron to conduct strikes from much greater distances, where their presence would be less detectable, and where German anti-aircraft gunners found it difficult to target fast-moving aircraft accurately. At these extended ranges, typically beyond 1,000 meters, 20-millimeter shells often fell short or missed entirely because of the challenge posed by leading a moving target at such distances. This tactical shift allowed the squadron to operate with a safer margin, maintaining their altitude and speed while still delivering effective strikes, especially against submarines and their accompanying defense systems. From the German viewpoint, their anti-aircraft tactics had been heavily influenced by their experiences in the Mediterranean theater. Commander Halman Friedrich Christensen, who led an anti-aircraft battery in occupied France, had trained his gunners to focus on engaging low-flying aircraft within a range of less than 1,000 meters. The rationale was that at this proximity, their 20-millimeter Flak 38 guns could reliably hit aircraft traveling at around 300 miles per hour. This was considered the sweet spot, where the guns had the highest likelihood of scoring hits. However, as aircraft began operating at distances of over 1,500 meters, the mathematics of anti-aircraft gunnery became much more complex. Gunners were required to lead their targets at increasingly steep angles, and even minor errors in estimation could result in complete misses. This challenge was compounded in naval operations, such as those conducted by the Italian Navy off the coast of Sicily. Captain de Corvetta Giuseppe Fontana, commanding the escort vessel Orsa, discovered that while his ship's Brada 20-millimeter guns could produce an impressive curtain of fire, their effectiveness was limited against British Beaufort torpedo bomb. Captain Hans Rudolf Rosing, commanding the 2nd U-boat flotilla, had been observing the evolving tactics of the Allied anti-submarine efforts with a growing sense of apprehension. In his war diary, he recorded that British aircraft seemed to possess an almost uncanny ability to locate and pinpoint the position of U-boat submarines, even when they were moving under heavy escort protection. This unsettling observation suggested that the Allies had developed a highly effective means of detection, one that perhaps went beyond the conventional visual or sonar methods. Rosing noted with concern that despite the heavy defenses surrounding the U-boat fleet, the British aircraft were consistently able to find them, raising fears about the effectiveness of their current concealment strategies. Unbeknownst to him, the British were leveraging ultra-intercepts, intercepted encrypted communications, that provided their coastal command with detailed and precise routing information about the movements of the U-boat flotilla. These intelligence breakthroughs had given the Allies a significant advantage, allowing them to anticipate the positions and paths of the submarines with remarkable accuracy. Still, Rosing found his worries compounded by a disturbing report from the previous patrol of U-960, one of his own vessels. On that mission, officers Aberlutin and Zorsi Gunther Heinrich had observed British aircraft maintaining a cautious distance from the defensive convoy they were guarding. The planes seemed to be conducting reconnaissance rather than actively attacking. remaining just outside the attack range and gathering crucial intelligence on their targets without engaging directly. This pattern of behavior suggested that the enemy had sophisticated reconnaissance tactics, carefully collecting information that could facilitate future strikes. The mounting tension in the Pacific Theater was underscored by an upcoming confrontation scheduled for the 10th of May in the year 1944. The Japanese submarine A-29, tasked with carrying vital technical and strategic information from Germany, such as Walter rocket engines and Enigma cipher machines, was to be protected by a formidable escort comprising German destroyers Z-23 and ZH-1, along with Junkers J-88 fighter aircraft. These layered defenses highlighted the importance of the mission, which aimed to deliver crucial technological secrets that could influence the broader naval and intelligence war. However, Commander Takazu Kanashi, in charge of the Uaran-29, was unaware of the specific weapon that would eventually challenge his escort's defenses. As he watched through his periscope, the approaching threat became apparent. British Mosquito aircraft, known for their agility and speed, drew closer. Suddenly and almost inexplicably, the aircraft opened fire from a range that seemed impossible to believe, at a distance far exceeding the usual attack parameters. The sharp reports of 57mm shells struck the destroyer's hull, causing splinters to fly across the water. In a startling turn of events, one of the J-88 fighters suddenly lost its port engine, torn completely away by a single shell from squadron leader Phillips' aircraft. The explosion and the ensuing chaos demonstrated the deadly precision and daring of the attacking aircraft, as well as the vulnerability of the unprepared escort. Back on the bridge of U-960 on that March morning, Commander Steinberg issued orders for his lookout personnel to remain alert and vigilant as the convoy approached the narrow, mine-cleared channel leading into La Palace. To ensure safety and security, 4 M-class minesweepers maintained their stations at intervals of 500 meters, carefully charting the waters ahead. Meanwhile, 2 spare Breer vessels, their hulls reinforced with poured concrete to withstand underwater explosions, led the formation through hazardous waters that had been mined by British aircraft over the preceding months. These vessels carried armament, a combination of 20mm and 37mm guns, manned by crews prepared to engage any threats. Their ammunition belts were loaded with both high-explosive and armor-piercing rounds, capable of engaging hostile aircraft at ranges up to 4,000 meters. Yet everyone involved understood that accurate fire beyond 2,000 meters was highly unlikely, given the limitations of their equipment. Historically, German naval anti-aircraft defenses had been reactive rather than proactive in their development. Initially, submarines relied heavily on their ability to evade aircraft by diving quickly at the first indication of danger, a tactic that had served well during the early years of the war in 1940 and 1941. During those times, coastal command aircraft were limited in number, and their detection equipment was rudimentary and often unreliable. But the advent of centimetric radar, equipment that German detection units could not yet sense, coupled with the use of Lee lights that illuminated submarines at night, decisively shifted the tactical balance. These innovations forced submarines to remain on the surface longer, making them more vulnerable and forcing them into direct confrontation with attacking aircraft. In response to these mounting challenges, the German Navy experimented with new tactics under the codename U-Flak, spearheading efforts to transform their submarines into more effective anti-aircraft platforms. Vessels such as U-441, U-256, U-621, and U-953 were modified to carry. During the tumultuous period of aerial combat, there was a noticeable sense of disappointment concerning the claims made by certain naval aircraft units, often referred to colloquially as flak boats. These units asserted that only 2 enemy aircraft had been definitively destroyed in their engagements, a stark contrast to the heavy casualties inflicted upon them by the opposing forces. This discrepancy became more apparent as Allied tactics evolved in response to enemy strategies. A new approach involved aircraft circling at a safe distance while simultaneously calling in reinforcements. These additional planes would then coordinate their attacks, unleashing a barrage that was often overwhelming for the enemy defenses, which struggled to cope with the sheer volume and precision of the coordinated assault. Lieutenant Wolfgang Müller, who served as the gunnery officer aboard the vessel designated U-256, played a key role during its transformation into the ULA configuration, a specialized setup designed to maximize its combat effectiveness. In a heartfelt letter to his wife, he described the formidable firepower of the ship's quadruple 20-millimeter gun mount. When all four barrels fired together, the weapon could unleash approximately 800 rounds per minute, creating a continuous stream of tracers. To the eye, this barrage resembled a solid, fiery rope stretching toward the attacking aircraft, a terrifying and impressive display of firepower meant to deter or destroy enemy threats. However, Muller was also acutely aware of the limitations inherent in this formidable armament. Each magazine held only 20 rounds per gun, necessitating frequent reloading during combat. These pauses in firing created dangerous gaps in the defensive barrier, windows of vulnerability that skilled Allied pilots quickly learned to exploit. They observed these moments when the ship's defenses momentarily faltered, turning them to their advantage to strike more effectively. Meanwhile, in Britain, concerted efforts were underway to counter the persistent threat posed by enemy submarines and aircraft, especially the innovative U-boat submarine drones. Scientists at the Telecommunications Research Establishment focused on developing advanced radar systems capable of detecting periscopes from distances of up to 5 miles, significantly enhancing the Allies' early warning capabilities. This technological progress was part of a broader, multi-front response to the submarine threat, with weapons designers at the Royal Aircraft Establishment experimenting with a variety of anti-submarine and anti-ship weapons. Among the innovations were the highball bouncing bomb and various guided missile systems, reflecting a drive to create more effective maritime weapons. Yet, amidst these experiments, a simpler, more practical solution gained prominence: mounting a large caliber gun on aircraft. The advantage of this approach was clear, especially after the Mullins company's demonstration that their automatic loading mechanism could reliably feed heavy 57mm shells without jamming, a crucial factor in wartime operations where reliability was paramount. Wing Commander Peter Wim Barnes, serving as the Deputy Director of Operational Requirements at the Air Ministry, strongly advocated for the development of the Mosquito Eye project. Despite skepticism from certain officers who argued that rockets alone provided sufficient anti-shipping capability, Barnes insisted that the 57mm gun offered superior accuracy, especially at longer ranges. Trials had indicated that this caliber achieved a hit rate of about 33% against tank-sized targets, compared to only 5% for rocket projectiles. While rockets were more versatile, they could be mounted on virtually any fighter bomber without requiring extensive modifications. Barnes emphasized the potential of the larger gun to deliver more precise hits at extended distances. The manufacturing process for these weapon systems was as complex as the concepts behind them. The Mullins factory in Peterborough undertook significant adaptations to produce the autoloaders necessary for these heavy shells. Normally specialized in the production of cigarette machinery, the factory was transformed into a wartime assembly line for military hardware. Skilled workers, many with years of experience in crafting precise machinery for handling tobacco and paper, shifted timelines and focus to produce mechanisms capable of reliably cycling 2-pound brass cartridges and 6-pound shells. The feeding mechanism employed a 5-tray system, reminiscent of their previous manufacturing of cigarette packaging equipment, but reinforced with heavy-gauge steel and powered by hydraulic rams. This robust design was essential to withstand the intense G-forces encountered during high-speed combat maneuvers, ensuring the guns remained operational when most needed. Meanwhile, German intelligence sources were piecing together fragmentary reports about British experiments with heavy aircraft armament. In Portugal, agents affiliated with the German Abwehr received rumors from British air crews who had made emergency landings in neutral territory. These reports hinted at a revolutionary new weapon, a flying artillery piece weighing around 600 pounds, that could allegedly destroy submarines and other large targets with devastating efficiency. Such intelligence, though incomplete, suggested a significant step forward in Allied aerial armament capabilities, fueling German efforts to understand and counter these emerging threats. The reports of the enemy's single-shot attacks initially met with skepticism within the Naval High Command. Staff officers were quick to dismiss these accounts as mere propaganda, confidently asserting that the recoil generated by such weaponry would be enough to tear apart any wooden aircraft attempting to attack. They underestimated the ingenuity of the Havilland engineers, who had already devised a solution to the recoil problem by implementing a sophisticated hydraulic buffer system combined with reinforced structural components. This innovative design allowed the Mosquito aircraft to fire their weapons effectively without risking structural damage, even during intense combat situations. On the morning of March 27th, conditions on the battlefield appeared almost ideal for an anti-shipping operation. Thick cloud cover at around 3,000 feet provided a natural cloak for the approaching attack aircraft, the Mosquitoes, allowing them to conceal their approach from enemy defenses. Meanwhile, intermittent gaps in the overcast sky granted the pilots just enough visibility to identify and target the German convoy from their high-altitude vantage point. These gaps in the clouds were critical, offering brief moments of clear sight that could be used to locate and assess the convoy's position before launching their strike. Leading this formation was Squadron Leader Phillips, flying in Mosquito 18, registered as NT-225. His navigator, Flight Officer Thompson, meticulously cross-checked their current position against the predicted track of the U-boat U-960, information that had been supplied by intelligence sources. Neither Phillips nor Thompson realized that their navigation data originated from ultra-intercepts, decrypts of German naval communications, that had precisely outlined the route and scheduled passage of the submarine. In essence, they were executing a mission based on intercepted signals that revealed the Germans' tactical movements with remarkable accuracy. Meanwhile, inside the operations room at the headquarters of the 19 Group, located in Plymouth, Air Vice Marshal Brian Baker closely monitored the unfolding operation. His keen eyes tracked the progress of the strike force through continuous position reports transmitted via wireless radio. Baker understood that this attack was more than just a routine interdiction. It was a crucial test of the new SETSI concept, an experimental strategy designed to confront heavily defended naval convoys. Previous engagements had seen Mosquitoes successfully bombing solitary submarines. However, these missions failed to provide insight into how the aircraft and their weapon systems would perform amidst dense anti-aircraft fire from multiple ships, especially the specially constructed flak ships, now often accompanying German convoys. The German convoy's escort was particularly formidable, thanks largely to the presence of spare Breer vessels, converted merchant ships that had been heavily armed and reinforced. These vessels typically carried up to 8 20mm guns and a 47mm anti-aircraft weapon, all protected by thick concrete armor designed to withstand attack. Commanded by seasoned officers from the CRES Marine Unit, these ships had developed a highly coordinated form of defense, working together to create overlapping zones of anti-aircraft fire. Their crews trained rigorously to maintain steady, disciplined fire, even when under attack, unlike ordinary merchant sailors who might panic and freeze when faced with diving enemy aircraft. One notable figure was Captain Zur C. Robert Giese, who had commanded the spare Breer vessels since 1942. He had crafted detailed standard operating procedures that maximized the anti-aircraft coverage essential for protecting submarine convoys. His instructions were unequivocal. His gunners were to engage any aircraft that approached within 4,000 meters, regardless of whether the aircraft appeared hostile or not. Giese believed that in the context of the Bay of Biscay, any British aircraft crossing into their vicinity should be treated as a threat, since the risk of misidentification could lead to catastrophic consequences. This aggressive stance, while effective in deterring enemy attacks, occasionally led to incidents where German aircraft responded with defensive fire, mistakenly firing upon their own vessels. The mathematics of anti-aircraft gunnery were unforgiving. Gunners had to calculate their target's speed and trajectory precisely, estimate the time it would take for their shells to reach the target, and then aim at where the aircraft would be upon shell impact, not where it was at the moment of firing. All of this had to be done while their ships pitched and rolled in the tumultuous Atlantic swell, complicating firing solutions further. Such factors made hitting a moving target at longer ranges exponentially more difficult, reducing the probability of a successful hit as distance increased, and highlighting the immense challenge faced by the gunners in defending the convoy against determined aerial assault. From perhaps as little as 10% at a distance of 1,000 meters, the effectiveness of anti-aircraft fire diminished significantly, dropping to less than 1% even when utilizing sophisticated range-finding equipment. This stark reduction remained evident despite the use of advanced targeting tools designed to improve accuracy. One illustrative example comes from the memories of Italian naval gunner, Sergeant Giovanni Martinelli. After Italy's surrender and his subsequent transfer to German service, Martinelli was stationed on a spare vessel equipped with a 37mm gun. Reflecting on his experiences, he recounted the deep frustration that arose whenever British aircraft hovered at what seemed to be just beyond the reach of their effective fire zone. Despite their best efforts, engaging these aircraft proved daunting, as the planes maintained a carefully calculated distance, deliberately staying outside the range where their guns could do any real damage. It became apparent that the crews operating anti-aircraft batteries were highly aware of the precise ranges where their weapons' effectiveness waned. This knowledge often led to prolonged, seemingly futile exchanges of gunfire, where thousands of rounds were sprayed into the sky without either side managing to score a hit. These battles of attrition, characterized by relentless firing and the consumption of ammunition, drained supply stocks and exhausted the gun crews. Yet they seldom resulted in decisive victories, serving more as prolonged tests of endurance than tactical breakthroughs. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the Japanese naval attaché, Rear Admiral Kojima Hideo, closely observed German anti-aircraft training efforts. His reports to Tokyo noted that the German weapons were of high quality, with particular emphasis on the 37mm Flak 36. This gun stood out for its rapid rate of fire and an effective ceiling reaching 4,200 meters. Still, Kojima identified a persistent human factor challenge. The gunners required months of rigorous training to develop the instinctive skills necessary for precise lead calculations. Achieving such proficiency was increasingly difficult as the pool of experienced instructors shrank, complicating efforts to improve anti-aircraft effectiveness. Meanwhile, in the midst of the ongoing conflict, crews were continually rotated into combat units to replace those lost or injured. As the convoy approached its final approach toward La Pallas, on the bridge of the vessel, Steinberg scanned the horizon through his binoculars. The familiar silhouette of the massive concrete U-boat pens loomed in the distance, their roofs dotted with anti-aircraft positions capable of adding their firepower to any defense. Yet an unsettling feeling lingered with Steinberg, prompting him to remain cautious. Perhaps it was the strange behavior of the British aircraft, which seemed to maintain a cautious distance rather than launching direct assaults. Such tactics suggested they might be testing new strategies or waiting for an opportune moment. It was as if they were deliberately probing the defenses, avoiding direct confrontation while gathering intelligence. The development of the Mosquito aircraft had been nothing short of extraordinary. Originally envisioned as an unarmed, high-speed bomber that relied on speed and altitude to evade enemy defenses, the Mosquito was primarily constructed from wood. This was a stark contrast to the trend toward all-metal aircraft during the war, reflecting an unconventional yet highly effective design philosophy. The aircraft's wooden construction had yielded significant advantages. For example, its ability to absorb battle damage was unrivaled among metal aircraft, allowing it to sustain hits that would cripple or destroy traditional fighters or bombers. Additionally, the smooth plywood skin generated less aerodynamic drag compared to riveted aluminum surfaces, enabling the Mosquito to achieve remarkable speeds. Powered by Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the aircraft could reach speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest aircraft of its era. Jeffrey de Havilland Jr., son of the company's founder and chief test pilot, played a crucial role in validating the aircraft's capabilities. He demonstrated that the wooden construction was not merely a cost-saving measure, but an intentional design choice that contributed to its performance. His tests proved that the Mosquito's unique composition offered tactical advantages, including the ability to recover from damage in flight. While de Havilland Jr. could never have imagined that his father's innovative airplane would be adapted to carry a weapon originally designed for destroying tanks, the aircraft's versatility had become apparent. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, its rays pierced through gaps in the cloud cover, illuminating the scene below. What had initially been a promising start to the day was increasingly tinged with the tension of an ongoing and unpredictable conflict, with each development adding new layers of complexity to the strategic considerations faced by those involved. In the vast and often unforgiving expanse of the ocean, moments of brilliance could sometimes be overshadowed by the very conditions that were supposed to offer protection. For instance, under certain atmospheric phenomena, patches of the sea could shimmer with a brilliant, almost reflective silver hue. Such shimmering patches, while visually striking, could turn into a double-edged sword in naval combat. They had the unfortunate effect of silhouetting vessels against the sky, especially attacking aircraft flying overhead. Instead of providing concealment, these luminous patches made ships easier targets for enemy anti-aircraft gunners, exposing their positions and making them more vulnerable during critical moments of engagement. Amidst these tactical complexities, Squadron Leader Phillips carefully orchestrated the approach of his aircraft formation. He had deliberately chosen to attack from the east, positioning the sun behind his planes as they began their descent. This strategic positioning meant that the bright rays of the sun would cast shadows behind the attacking squadron, reducing their visibility against the sky and making it harder for enemy defenses to pinpoint their exact location. As they descended from an altitude of about 5,000 feet, Phillips slowed his aircraft to a controlled, steady speed. This deliberate reduction was not merely for safety, but also to give his navigator ample time to accurately align the gun sights on the lead spare Breer vessel, a critical component in ensuring effective fire. The German convoy's formation demonstrated a refined tactical evolution shaped by 2 years of relentless battles in the Bay of Biscay. The convoy was arranged with a clear understanding of the lessons learned from past encounters. The minesweepers, specialized vessels equipped to project overlapping fields of fire, were positioned in such a way as to maximize their defensive coverage while maintaining sufficient separation to prevent the entire convoy from being damaged by a single explosive device, be it a bomb or a torpedo. The lead vessels, known as the spare Breers, were tasked with absorbing the initial detonation of any mines that might be encountered. Their heavy armament was meticulously arranged to counter any enemy aircraft daring to attack head-on, and U-960, a particularly vital vessel, was securely tucked away in the center of the formation. This positioning was strategic, as it allowed the ship to execute a crash dive if the escort screen was compromised, thus increasing its chances of survival amid the chaos of combat. Yet Steinberg, the commander responsible for U-960, was acutely aware of the dangers posed by the shallow coastal waters. Diving in these treacherous shallows carried significant risks, especially given the threat of British aircraft potentially marking his position for destruction by pursuing destroyers. Meanwhile, in the cockpit of the second Mosquito, MM425, Flight Officer Turner monitored the unfolding scene. He watched as Phillips's aircraft initiated its attack run with precise synchronization. Turner's keen eyes caught the steady burst of tracer fire erupting from the German convoy. Every gun capable of engaging the attacking aircraft had opened fire. The 20-millimeter shells, equipped with self-destruct mechanisms, burst in puffs of black smoke at around 2,000 meters, effectively blurring the enemy's advance and forcing them to reconsider their tactics. Simultaneously, the 37-millimeter rounds zipped past in streaks of burning tracers, continuing their flight path beyond the initial burst point and into the distant sky, traveling up to about 3,000 meters before self-destructing. Although these projectiles disappeared from sight, they still bore the potential to cause damage, remaining hazardous to any aircraft unlucky enough to be struck by the ascending steel. The destructive capacity of the 57-millimeter Mullins gun had taken many by surprise during testing phases. Experienced test pilots quickly learned that, once they compensated for the slight downward pitch caused by the gun's recoil, they could reliably hit targets roughly the size of a tank at distances reaching 1,500 yards. The heavy hydraulic buffer within the weapon system absorbed most of the recoil energy, preventing excessive movement. However, the force generated during firing was still sufficient to affect the aircraft's trim, meaning pilots had to maintain steady, consistent pressure on the control column to keep their sight picture stable throughout the firing sequence. Such precision was essential to ensure accuracy and to prevent the aircraft from veering off course during the intense moments of firing. Far away in Berlin, Gross Admiral Karl Donat scrutinized the latest reports of losses in the Bay of Biscay. Despite the deployment of concentrated multi-vessel firepower and the reinforcement of anti-aircraft defenses, casualty figures had not declined as expected. This troubling trend led him to suspect that the British had devised some new weapons or tactics capable of circumventing German defenses. His staff members reassured him that their combined firepower, strategically distributed across numerous vessels, should have made close-range attacks exceedingly costly for enemy aircraft. Still, these reassurances did little to quell his growing concern. The experiences of the Italian Navy in the Mediterranean further underscored the difficulty of defending against elusive aerial assaults. Commander Ammiraglio Raphael Dorton relayed to Supermarina that British aircraft appeared to possess an uncanny ability to damage vessels without. The vessels struggled considerably to track fast-moving targets, a challenge that had long plagued such ships in volatile combat zones. Although its commander, Lieutenant Commander W.S., attributed this difficulty primarily to the advancements in torpedo technology, believing that the rapid evolution of underwater weaponry was behind the tracking failures, he failed to consider the possibility of the enemy employing standoff gunnery tactics. This oversight would prove to be a costly mistake for the Regia Marina, especially in the critical months leading up to Italy's capitulation, when several of their vessels were lost or severely damaged in encounters that could have been mitigated through better recognition of the changing battlefield dynamics. Historically, Japanese submarine doctrine emphasized a cautious approach, advocating for avoiding direct surface confrontations with aircraft whenever possible. Their submarines, such as the I-29, were designed with a primary focus on stealth and quick diving capabilities, boasting the ability to crash dive within 30 seconds of sensing danger. This strategy was rooted in the understanding that surface engagements with aircraft posed significant risks and that retreat was often the preferable option. However, the long and arduous transit through the Bay of Biscay to reach German port facilities rendered such tactics increasingly impractical, especially given the extended exposure to enemy patrols and aircraft. Consequently, Japanese commanders found themselves compelled to depend heavily on German surface escorts for protection during these lengthy voyages. Despite this reliance, they harbored private doubts regarding the effectiveness of their German allies' naval defenses. Intelligence and reconnaissance reports from Tokyo painted a concerning picture. Losses among the escort vessels were mounting, despite recent efforts to bolster their anti-aircraft armament, particularly on ships like the U-boat and their accompanying escorts. These increasingly heavy defenses were, in many instances, still insufficient against the evolving tactics and firepower employed by Allied aircraft. At that pivotal moment, the first 57mm shell from Phillips' artillery set struck the lead vessel in the convoy, a converted merchant vessel used as a spare breer, just above the waterline. This projectile, an armor-piercing round, punched cleanly through the vessel's hull plating, which had been reinforced to some degree, but was no match for the high-velocity strike. Upon entering an ammunition storage compartment amidships, the shell detonated with devastating effect, igniting a violent explosion. A plume of smoke and roaring flames burst forth from ventilation shafts, while secondary explosions rippled through the ship's interior, destabilizing the vessel's structural integrity further, and adding chaos to an already dire scene. Despite this, the German gun crews refused to cease fire, maintaining their aggressive defense even as damage control teams scrambled to contain the spreading fires. Their disciplined training was evident as they fought to prevent the conflagration from engulfing vital sections of the ship, their motions driven by instinct and experience rather than panic. Meanwhile, on the deck, Captain Steinberg watched the unfolding chaos with a mixture of disbelief and grim resolve. His attention was drawn to the relentless attack from the British aircraft, which continued their strafing runs from well beyond the effective range of the anti-aircraft defenses. The aircraft's pilots executed their attacks with a measured precision, firing their machine guns in steady, deliberate bursts that struck with devastating accuracy. Each impact was marked by the characteristic crack of a heavy-caliber shell-piercing steel, a sound foreign to Steinberg's previous experiences with aerial assaults, which had primarily involved bombs and depth charges. This new form of attack represented a stark shift in the tactical landscape. The attacking aircraft employed a form of standoff gunnery, enabling them to stay outside the effective range of the German defenses, while still delivering lethal fire. This change fundamentally altered the dynamics of engagement, forcing German gunners to adapt quickly or risk being outflanked and overwhelmed. Mathematical calculations underscored the peril. The 57 millimeter Mullins gun boasted an accurate range of approximately 18,800 yards, far surpassing the effectiveness of the German 20 millimeter anti-aircraft guns, which became practically useless beyond 2,000 meters. This created a deadly zone where the British Mosquito aircraft could operate with relative impunity, where German defenders could neither reach nor effectively intercept the enemy. The Mosquito's wooden construction made them especially difficult to track with optical rangefinders, often eluding conventional tracking methods. Their high speed and the complex deflection calculations required for their attack runs granted them a decisive advantage over the convoy's defenses, turning the tide of the battle in favor of the attackers. Lieutenant Commander Friedrich Weber, commanding one of the M-class minesweepers, ordered his crew operating the 37 millimeter gun to engage the attacking aircraft despite the extreme range. His hope was that the larger caliber weapon might force the Mosquito pilots to break off their attack or at least deter them from pressing their advantage further. However, the British pilots appeared fully aware of the limitations and boundaries of their offensive capabilities. They maintained their distance meticulously, engaging in a calculated, systematic bombardment of the convoy without venturing into range, where their aircraft could become vulnerable. During the fierce aerial encounter, the area where anti-aircraft defenses were most concentrated and thus posed the greatest threat was clearly the strategic convoy route, particularly around the vital bridge structures and the heavily defended escort vessels. It was in this critical zone that the enemy's firepower was most intense, aiming to disrupt and destroy the attacking aircraft as well as the ships they sought to protect. The chaos unfolded as one of the enemy shells struck the bridge structure, an explosive blow that sent jagged fragments spiraling through the ranks of gun crews. Steinberg vividly felt the explosion's tremor beneath his feet, a visceral reminder of the deadly precision of the attack. The projectile, a 7.5 centimeter shell, tore through the outer casing of the submarine, a sophisticated piece of wartime engineering that was now compromised. As it burst through the hull, it ruptured fuel bunkers deep inside the vessel, releasing a torrent of diesel oil that streamed into the boat's wake, creating a slick trail behind the sinking submarine. Despite their efforts to shield the convoy, the escort ships fought desperately to obscure the movement using a smokescreen. But the advantage held by the attacking Mosquito aircrafts, particularly their altitude, enabled them to see through these efforts. The pilots, constantly adjusting their aim with keen precision based on the last observed positions of their targets, pressed their attack with relentless determination. The 7.5 centimeter shells continued their deadly journey, finding their targets with unnerving consistency. Each successful strike further weakened the convoy's defenses, knocking out gun positions and igniting ammunition magazines, causing fiery explosions that added chaos and destruction. In a subsequent attack run, Squadron Leader Phillips directed his aircraft toward one of the minesweepers that had moved into position to shield the damaged convoy ship, designated as 960. His remaining shells struck with devastating effect, hitting the vessel's bridge and engine room. The strike caused the ship to lose momentum, forcing it to fall behind the main formation. Thick smoke billowed from the ventilation grates, signaling fires that spread rapidly within the ship's interior, further impairing its ability to continue the fight or maintain formation. As the crew scrambled to abandon their gun positions and battle the spreading flames, they inadvertently created gaps in the defensive formation. These breaches were immediately exploited by the conventional Mosquito fighters, which swooped in to take advantage of the disarray. The psychological impact on the German crews was profound. They saw firsthand that their weapon systems, which had once seemed formidable, were now largely ineffective against the high-flying Mosquito aircraft. This realization fostered a sense of helplessness that undermined the morale of the defenders far more than traditional bombing runs, where at least they still believed in their capacity to fight back, however limited. This stark new reality compelled a fundamental reassessment of convoy defense strategies, which had seemed adequate only a few months earlier. When 960 finally limped into La Pallas, its escort vessels damaged and hundreds of lives lost, the gravity of the situation was unmistakable. Steinberg's after-action report emphasized the inability of traditional anti-aircraft guns to defend against aircraft capable of engaging from beyond the effective range of their firepower. The report recommended that future convoys should be escorted throughout their entire passage by fighter aircraft, rather than relying solely on static and limited anti-aircraft defenses, which had proven increasingly ineffective. This recommendation underscored how thoroughly the Mosquito Tetsi aircraft had upended German defensive doctrine. Initially, the Technical Intelligence Section at Marine Headquarters refused to accept that the British had managed to mount a 7.5-centimeter gun, an artillery piece of significant size, on a wooden-bodied aircraft such as the Mosquito. Experts argued that the recoil forces would be too great and would exceed the structural limits of any wooden airframe. Nevertheless, after recovering shell fragments from the battlefield and gathering testimonies from multiple witnesses, the military command was eventually compelled to accept this startling new reality. The acknowledgement of such a weapon's existence prompted urgent calls for the development and deployment of longer-range and more potent anti-aircraft weapons capable of engaging the Mosquitoes before they could reach their firing positions and deliver their deadly payloads. Wing Commander Tony Phillips continued flying the formidable Mosquito Tetsi throughout the spring of 1944. His combat record during this period included a notable engagement in May when his squadron participated in the attack on the Japanese submarine Wish-29. In that fierce confrontation, Phillips's aircraft managed to destroy a Junkers J-88 fighter, a notable achievement that further demonstrated the versatility and lethal capability of the Mosquito Tetsi during this critical phase of the naval and aerial warfare. In a remarkable demonstration of the formidable firepower possessed by the new artillery technology, a single projectile was fired with such force that it completely severed an aircraft's engine from its fuselage. This striking event exemplified the devastating destructive potential of the 57mm guns, which could effectively neutralize both aircraft and naval vessels through their sheer power. Nevertheless, it was widely acknowledged that this capability, impressive as it was, represented a secondary advantage rather than the primary function of the weapon system. The development and deployment of this advanced armament primarily aimed at different strategic objectives, with its anti-aircraft and anti-ship roles seen as complementary benefits. The Mullins Company, a significant contributor to wartime innovation, gained considerable recognition for its efforts during the conflict. Their technological ingenuity, particularly in adapting cigarette manufacturing machinery for military applications, earned Desmond Mullins himself the prestigious United States Medal of Freedom. This accolade was awarded in honor of his inventive re-engineering efforts, which showcased how civilian industrial technology could be seamlessly transitioned into military utility during a time of urgent need. Despite this success, the company's focus eventually shifted back to peaceful civilian production once the war concluded. However, the wartime innovations in weaponry, especially involving the Mosquito Tetsi, remained shrouded in secrecy for many years after their initial development. The true scope and capabilities of this formidable device were classified at the highest levels, ensuring that detailed information about its performance and strategic importance stayed under wraps for an extended period. Meanwhile, the Germans responded to the perceived threat posed by the Tetsi with accelerated efforts to develop new anti-aircraft systems. These included experimental programs involving guided missiles and shells equipped with proximity fuses designed to engage enemy aircraft at extended ranges with increased accuracy and efficiency. Despite these advancements, the efforts by the Germans came too late to influence the outcome of the Battle of the Atlantic. Throughout the year of 1944, Allied forces continued to suffer significant losses of submarines and aircraft. Allied air power, equipped with superior technology and tactical coordination, exploited their advantages to devastating effect, inflicting increasing damage on enemy vessels and disrupting supply lines vital to the Axis powers. The German response was ultimately insufficient to stem the rising tide of Allied dominance at sea. Meanwhile, Italian naval officers, scrutinizing German after-action reports, expressed growing concern over their own increasingly vulnerable anti-aircraft defenses. Many Italian ships, primarily armed with 20mm Breda guns, whose effective engagement ranges were even shorter than those of the German weapons, found themselves ill-equipped to defend against standoff attacks launched from greater distances. In a desperate attempt to address these deficiencies, Italy sought to acquire more powerful German-made 37 and 40 mm guns, hoping these would provide some measure of capability against the emerging aerial threats. However, these efforts were abruptly halted in September of 1943 when Italy surrendered, ending active military efforts and rendering further procurement impossible. Simultaneously, the Japanese submarine fleet, preparing for operations into European waters, studied lessons learned from encounters such as that involving the Iwak 29 submarine, which faced the Mosquito Tetsi. Based on these insights, Japanese engineers and commanders incorporated additional anti-aircraft weapons and intensified training for their gunners, emphasizing the importance of engaging aircraft at the maximum possible range, regardless of ammunition consumption. These measures reflected a strategic shift towards offensive defense, aiming to improve the survivability of submarines against air attack. Nevertheless, these enhanced defensive measures proved largely ineffective. The I-52 submarine, for instance, was ultimately caught and destroyed by conventional Allied aircraft during June of the year 1944. Despite its reinforced anti-aircraft armament, the vessel was unable to prevent its own sinking, highlighting the limitations of such enhancements against increasingly sophisticated and coordinated air assaults. The loss underscored the ongoing challenge faced by submarine forces attempting to adapt to the evolving aerial threat landscape. Throughout 1944, production of the Mosquito Tetsi persisted, with approximately 27 aircraft completed before the program was ultimately discontinued. The decision to halt its development stemmed from strategic reassessments, emphasizing the advantages of rocket-equipped fighter bombers, which offered greater versatility despite sacrificing some degree of accuracy. These newer aircraft could engage multiple target types without requiring extensive modifications, allowing for faster deployment and more flexible tactical responses. The shift was driven by the declining perceived threat from the U-boat and the urgent need for adaptable, multi-role aircraft capable of operating effectively across various combat scenarios. Despite the retreat from the Tetsi program, veterans of the 248 Squadron passionately maintained that no other weapon could match the Tetsi's unique to destroy hardened targets from safe distances, thus minimizing risk to its operators. The psychological impact of employing such a powerful weapon extended well beyond its immediate battlefield effectiveness. German submarine crews in particular grew increasingly hesitant to surface their vessels, even when traveling within heavily defended convoys, out of fear that British aircraft possessed weapons capable of penetrating their hulls and damaging pressure-sensitive areas from ranges where their return fire would be ineffective. This pervasive apprehension contributed significantly to the virtual abandonment. By late 1944, the strategic environment surrounding the operations of the U-boat in the Bay of Biscay had become increasingly complex and challenging. An in-depth technical examination of the Mullins' innovative gun system revealed a series of remarkably clever solutions to a set of problems that had stumped traditional weapons designers for quite some time. Central to its design was an automatic loading mechanism, which was ingeniously engineered by adapting principles commonly found in high-speed packaging machinery. This approach allowed the weapon to achieve a highly reliable feeding process despite the intense and often violent maneuvers characteristic of aerial combat, where rapid changes in orientation and speed could easily disrupt less sophisticated systems. The Mullins gun system employed a 5-tray magazine configuration that was crucial in enabling sustained fire without the frequent reloading interruptions that often hampered other heavy aircraft-mounted weapons. This design innovation significantly enhanced the operational endurance of attacking aircraft, allowing them to maintain a higher rate of fire over extended periods, an essential advantage during prolonged engagements. The evolution of German anti-aircraft tactics, driven by the growing threat of such advanced weaponry, led to desperate measures, including mounting formidable 88mm flak guns on specially reinforced vessels. These ships were adapted specifically to counter the increasing danger posed by fast and agile aircraft. However, these anti-aircraft guns, despite their formidable caliber, proved to have limitations, chiefly their slow traverse speeds, which hampered their ability to effectively track and engage swift-moving aerial targets. Nonetheless, their primary value lay in their psychological impact. Gun crews believed that their efforts at least offered a chance to engage attacking aircraft, even if the likelihood of scoring hits at long range remained minimal. British pilots operating conventional Mosquito aircraft, often flying alongside the specialized TETSI variants, developed a set of coordinated tactics designed to capitalize on the strengths of both aircraft types. The planes equipped with 57 mm guns would suppress anti-aircraft positions from long ranges, forcing the defenses to divert attention, while the standard fighter bombers maneuvered closer to deliver rockets and cannon fire against vessels whose defenses had been severely weakened. This integrated combined arms approach turned out to be devastatingly effective, even against heavily fortified convoys protected by extensive defenses. Behind the scenes, the industrial infrastructure supporting TETSI operations was highly specialized. Maintenance facilities at coastal command bases incorporated advanced workshops capable of servicing the complex mechanisms of the Mullins gun systems. These facilities employed technicians trained with dual expertise in both aircraft systems and artillery maintenance, working collaboratively to ensure that the weaponry remained fully operational at all times. Their unique skill set represented a rare fusion of technological disciplines that had never before been brought together in a military context, enabling the rapid repair and precise tuning of these intricate systems. In response to the innovative threat posed by the TETSI aircraft, German engineers experimented with a variety of countermeasures. Among these efforts were attempts to develop radar-guided flak systems designed to engage aircraft at extended ranges. Unfortunately, the wooden construction of the Mosquito aircraft resulted in a poor radar return, which severely limited the effectiveness of the German radar systems. Additionally, the high-speed flight characteristic of the Mosquito complicated the tracking and targeting process for radar fire control, further diminishing their utility against this new type of threat. These combined factors rendered German radar-based defense systems largely ineffective against the TETSI aircraft's unique profile and maneuverability. The repercussions extended beyond aerial combat, notably impacting submarine operations. Submarines found themselves forced to spend longer durations submerged to avoid detection and attack from air units, which significantly increased transit times, hampered operational flexibility, and reduced overall effectiveness. The necessity to allocate large numbers of destroyers and minesweepers as heavy surface escorts further strained the maritime forces, as these vessels were diverted from other crucial missions, creating a cascade of logistical and strategic challenges across the entire naval fleet. Following the war, comprehensive analysis conducted by the United States Navy's Operational Research Group concluded that the Mosquito TETSI represented a highly optimized solution to a specific tactical challenge. It provided a capability for standoff engagement against well-fortified maritime targets without the need for the complex, costly guided missile systems that many considered an advanced technology yet to be fully matured. The TETSI's design and operational concept offered a practical and effective means of countering heavily defended ships with minimal additional technological complexity, making it an exemplary model of tactical innovation under wartime pressures. During the period of intense military innovation, efforts were made to develop rocket and torpedo systems that prioritize versatility and adaptability over pinpoint accuracy. These weapons, although not as precise, offered the strategic advantage of being more flexible in various combat scenarios, allowing for a broader range of targets and tactical applications. The introduction and deployment of such systems, particularly the TETSI, came at a considerable human cost. Hundreds of German sailors lost their lives or sustained injuries when their vessels were struck by powerful 57mm shells that managed to pierce their ship's armor. Survivors of such attacks frequently reported experiencing severe psychological trauma as they endured relentless bombardments from weapon systems they found difficult, if not impossible, to effectively counter or evade. This psychological strain persisted well beyond the moments of combat, profoundly impacting the morale of German crews even after their ships had reached the relative safety of fortified ports, where efforts were made to restore order and confidence among the sailors. Historical records from the 248th Squadron reveal that pilots operating the TETSI faced extensive and rigorous training regimes to acquire proficiency in handling these uniquely modified aircraft. The alterations to the standard Mosquito aircraft included an off-center gun placement, which introduced asymmetric thrust, This design nuance significantly complicated the aircraft's handling characteristics, especially in emergency situations such as engine failures, requiring pilots to master special procedures for engine-out scenarios. Additionally, the recoil generated by the 57 mm guns affected the aircraft's trim, which necessitated continuous adjustments during firing sequences to maintain stability and accuracy. Developing the necessary skills to operate these weapons effectively was a demanding process. Even seasoned Mosquito pilots required several weeks of dedicated practice to attain the level of proficiency needed to safely and effectively employ the Tetsi in combat, highlighting the complexity inherent in this innovative weapon system. The successful deployment of the Tetsi had notable strategic implications, shaping Allied military planning for potential operations in the Pacific region. Intelligence and military proposals considered deploying similarly armed aircraft to disrupt Japanese shipping lines, leveraging the weapon's destructive capacity against maritime targets. However, these plans were ultimately rendered moot by Japan's surrender, which brought an end to hostilities before the modified aircraft could be deployed in the Far East. As a result, the Mosquito Tetsi became a unique, specialized asset used exclusively within the European theater, and its true potential remained largely unrealized on the broader warfront. This left a legacy of innovation that, while promising, was curtailed by the swift conclusion of hostilities. Operational challenges also arose in the maintenance and logistical management of the Tetsi aircraft. The high-velocity 57 mm rounds inflicted significant wear on the gun barrels, which required replacement after firing approximately 200 rounds. This limitation imposed constraints on sustained operational tempo, compelling crews to meticulously plan and manage their ammunition supplies during missions. Pilots learned the importance of conserving their initial load of 25 shells for high-value, time-sensitive targets, rather than wasting rounds on less critical, opportunistic targets. This tactical conservatism was essential to maximize the effectiveness of each sortie and ensure that the weapons remained functional throughout the mission. The intelligence gathered from captured German documents detailing the Setsi threat provided valuable insights into enemy morale and operational planning. Translated reports revealed that German naval commanders, particularly those in U-boat units, experienced growing concern over their inability to counter this novel weapon system effectively. Fearful of the psychological and tactical disruption caused by the Tetsi, German officers worried about the influence of Allied propaganda, which publicized successful Tetsi operations and aimed to undermine their confidence further. Such propaganda efforts exploited the weapon's demonstrated effectiveness to erode morale among German personnel, intensifying their sense of vulnerability and helplessness in the face of this innovative threat. Environmental factors significantly influenced the operational effectiveness of the Tetsi aircraft. The notoriously unpredictable weather conditions in the Bay of Bisque, characterized by thick fog and frequent storms, often limited flying days and hampered operational planning. Rough seas further complicated aiming calculations, as the movement of ships at sea introduced variables that pilots had to account for when engaging maneuvering targets. Mastering the skill of adjusting fire for ship motion necessitated extensive practice in real combat conditions, where even minor mistakes could have fatal consequences. Pilots had to develop a keen sense of environmental awareness and rapid adaptability to succeed in such challenging conditions, often under the pressure of combat urgency. The legacy of the Mosquito Tetsi left a lasting imprint on post-war military technology and aircraft armament development. Several nations embarked on experiments with large-caliber aircraft guns for anti-shipping roles, inspired by the weapon's demonstrated effectiveness during the war. Although guided missile technology ultimately emerged as the more practical solution for long-range standoff engagement, the concept of using aircraft as flying artillery persisted in specialized ground attack roles for some time. Over the subsequent decades, the emphasis shifted away from large-caliber guns in favor of missile systems that offered improved range, accuracy, and versatility, rendering the idea of a dedicated flying artillery platform largely obsolete in modern aerial warfare. In addition to the operational and strategic insights gained, German naval engineers undertook detailed. In the complex landscape of aerial warfare during the closing months of World War II, the development of innovative weapon systems, such as the Tetsi, showcased remarkable ingenuity and active adaptation to emerging threats. These aircraft were designed to deliver precision strikes against enemy naval vessels, particularly in contested coastal regions, with plans that, unfortunately, remained unrealized largely due to the practical limitations of weight capacity in the war's abrupt conclusion. The concept of increasing armor protection for these aircraft was thoroughly considered, with engineers proposing enhancements that could have improved survivability. However, these modifications were ultimately abandoned because adding extra armor would have made the aircraft too heavy for effective deployment, threatening their agility and range. The cessation of hostilities rendered further development unnecessary, leaving these promising ideas on the shelf. A key factor in the success of TETSI operations lay in the seamless coordination between different branches of the military. Coastal Command worked closely with intelligence agencies, creating a model of inter-service cooperation that proved highly effective. Ultra intercepts played a vital role in this team effort, providing precise targeting information based on intercepted enemy communications. Complementing this intelligence, surveillance aircraft confirmed convoy positions, allowing strike aircraft to optimize their attack runs. This synergy meant that strike aircraft could maximize their effectiveness while minimizing the risk to crews, exemplifying a sophisticated integration of intelligence, reconnaissance, and attack capabilities. Training protocols for TETSI crews reflected the specialized nature of their missions, emphasizing skills such as deflection shooting and accurate range estimation. Pilots dedicated countless hours to practicing against precise, artificially created targets known as TOADs, mock targets designed to simulate the movement and appearance of enemy vessels. This rigorous training developed their instincts for lead calculations, which are crucial for hitting moving targets at long distances. The meticulous preparation aimed to instill in pilots the reflexive judgment needed for long-range gunnery, a skill traditionally associated with naval surface combat rather than aerial warfare, highlighting the innovative cross-domain application of naval tactics to the aerial battlefield. The final documented TETSI mission took place on April the 5th in the year of 1945. During this operation, a swarm of mosquitoes, an aircraft type, struck German surface ships anchored in the Kattegat area, successfully sinking no fewer than 5 vessels, including a spare Breer, with all crew members on board. This attack vividly demonstrated that even in the war's final weeks, German naval forces remained vulnerable and unprepared to counter this novel weapon system effectively. Despite their desperate defensive fire efforts, the 57mm shells from the attack aircraft repeatedly found their targets, underscoring the weapon's precision and lethality. Analysis of ammunition expenditure records reveals that each TETSI aircraft achieved an efficiency rate of approximately 1 hit for every 3 rounds fired at naval targets. This exceptional accuracy was a testament to the carefully honed tactics and the skill of the pilots, affirming that, when employed correctly, conventional guns, if designed and used properly, could deliver precise strikes comparable to more advanced weapon systems. This realization challenged existing assumptions about the limitations of traditional armament, demonstrating that systematic training and tactical refinement could elevate standard weaponry to a new level of effectiveness. From a human engineering standpoint, the design of the TETSI aircraft incorporated several specialized features to ensure pilot safety and operational efficiency. For instance, pilots were secured with custom-engineered restraints, particularly reinforced shoulder harnesses, that could withstand the sudden and powerful recoil forces generated during firing. Navigators, who often had to operate amidst violent pitching and rolling motions of the aircraft during attack runs, required additional padding to protect their bodies from impacts with cockpit equipment. These ergonomic considerations ensured that crew members could maintain focus and stability even under the extreme conditions of combat firing. Although the Germans publicly downplayed the threat posed by the TETSI system, claiming it was ineffective against well-defended convoys, their internal communications told a different story. Admirals and high-ranking officials privately expressed concern that no existing German technology or doctrine could adequately counter this new threat. Internal reports acknowledged that the weapon was highly effective and posed significant strategic challenges, but the technological gap prevented the development of an immediate countermeasure. The industrial effort to produce TETSI aircraft entailed a complex and highly coordinated operation involving multiple industrial establishments. De Havilland's aircraft factories collaborated closely with Mullins Machinery Works, ensuring that each component, particularly the weapon systems, met rigorous precision standards. Components manufactured at different locations were transported to specially designated assembly facilities where exact alignment of the gun mechanisms with the aircraft's airframe was carefully verified. This meticulous process was critical for ensuring that the weapons functioned reliably and accurately during operational missions. In response to the emerging Tetsi threat, the Germans experimented with a variety of countermeasures, including the deployment of decoy vessels. These ships were equipped with an array of anti-aircraft weapons, but lacked significant armor, purpose-built to lure attacking aircraft away from more valuable assets such as submarines. This tactic aimed to divert enemy fire, reducing the risk to critical submarines operating nearby. Despite these efforts, British intelligence was quick to identify and flag these decoy vessels, instructing, during the period of intensive aerial combat, the deployment of specialized gunnery systems required pilots to maintain unobstructed line-of-sight visibility of their targets. This necessity was especially critical when engaging high-value objectives at considerable distances, where traditional bombing methods relied heavily on radar guidance. Such operational constraints meant that missions involving these weapons had to be conducted predominantly during daylight hours and under favorable weather conditions, limiting the scope and flexibility of their use. The precision required in targeting was thus balanced against environmental factors, with pilots needing clear sight lines to ensure accuracy and safety during complex engagements. In the aftermath of the conflict, detailed interviews with German naval personnel shed light on the psychological and strategic influence exerted by the weapon system known as the Tetsi. Even among crews who had never directly encountered the aircraft, there persisted a pervasive sense of fear rooted in survivor accounts and reports from intelligence sources. This created a mythos surrounding the Tetsi, an almost legendary weapon whose reputation extended beyond its actual operational deployment. Such perceptions heightened the threat perception among enemy forces, demonstrating how psychological warfare could amplify the physical impact of a weapon even when its physical presence was limited in number. Analyses conducted by the Air Ministry highlighted the remarkable cost-effectiveness of the Tetsi program. Although the initiative required substantial investment in modifying aircraft and training specialized crews, the operational benefits justified these expenses. The system proved highly effective at neutralizing high-value targets, often destroying or damaging strategic assets with minimal losses, thereby validating the concept. This efficiency persisted even as the strategic focus shifted toward newer technologies, such as rocket-based weaponry, which gradually replaced the Tetsi in operational roles. The cost-benefit ratio established by these evaluations underscored the importance of innovative weapon systems in achieving tactical advantages without disproportionate expenditure. Archival technical documentation from Mullins Company provides insight into the rigorous testing processes undertaken to perfect the automatic loading mechanism integral to the Tetsi system. Prior to achieving operational certification, thousands of rounds were fired during ground-based trials, each designed to push the system to its limits. These exhaustive tests involved intentionally subjecting individual components to destructive stresses to ensure their reliability under combat conditions. The meticulous development process underscored the technological sophistication required to produce a dependable weapon capable of sustained combat performance, emphasizing quality assurance at every stage from prototype to operational deployment. The influence of the Tetsi program extended beyond its immediate application, impacting broader British aircraft development initiatives. Designers considered the advantages of integrating heavy gun armament into various aircraft types, inspired by the successful combination demonstrated by the Mosquito, a platform uniquely capable of balancing speed, range, and structural robustness. The Mosquito's design allowed it to employ such formidable weaponry effectively, making it a standout example of multi-role aircraft that could adapt to a variety of tactical scenarios. This cross-pollination of ideas encouraged innovation across British aviation projects, with the Tetsi system serving as a catalyst for exploring heavily armed aircraft capable of performing diverse combat missions. Attempts by German intelligence to gather information about the Tetsi system involved covert efforts to recruit personnel from Mullins manufacturing facilities. These efforts included Abu agents offering substantial sums in exchange for technical insights into the weapon's design and operation. Despite several close calls and breaches of security, British counterintelligence measures successfully thwarted these espionage attempts, preventing any significant compromise of sensitive technology. The operational doctrine devised for the employment of the Tetsi emphasized patience, precision, and strategic positioning. Pilots were trained to maintain optimal firing ranges, even at the expense of prolonged exposure to enemy fire, trusting that their aircraft's speed and ability to retreat would provide safety rather than engaging in aggressive, risky maneuvers. Statistical analysis of operational reports revealed that the aircraft equipped with the Tetsi system achieved their highest success rates when operating in coordinated pairs. In such tactics, one airplane was tasked with suppressing enemy anti-aircraft defenses, creating a safer environment for its partner to carry out the primary attack on high-value targets. This approach maximized the limited ammunition capacity by ensuring more accurate and sustained attacks, while also reducing the risk of exposing both aircraft to retaliatory fire. The pairing strategy exemplified a sophisticated understanding of tactical effectiveness, emphasizing teamwork, patience, and precise execution. The eventual discontinuation of the Tetsi program in the early months of the year 1945 reflected evolving operational priorities. As the threat posed by the U-boat naval forces waned, the need for specialized anti-shipping aircraft diminished correspondingly. Moreover, the advent of rockets as versatile, powerful weapons provided sufficient effectiveness against residual maritime targets, making dedicated artillery systems like Tetsi less justifiable in terms of cost and operational complexity. The changing strategic landscape dictated a shift toward more flexible, multi-purpose weapons that could adapt to the reduced threat environment without sacrificing overall mission capability. Historical evaluations of the Mosquito's role in the Allied victory underscore its significant contribution to maintaining pressure on German submarine operations and maritime defenses. This aircraft's ability to deliver precise, high-velocity gunnery and tactical payloads proved instrumental in disrupting enemy supply lines, hindering resupply efforts, and, during the tumultuous and decisive period of the year 1944, the maritime combat landscape was undergoing a rapid transformation, with new classes of submarines and innovative weapon systems coming into service at an unprecedented rate. Despite these technological strides, the Allied forces found themselves unable to regain full dominance over their adversaries' maritime initiatives for a considerable stretch of time. This persistent challenge arose largely because these emerging submarines and weapon systems often outpaced the tactical doctrines and technological countermeasures that the Allies had previously relied upon, thereby complicating efforts to establish clear naval superiority. The advent of novel submarines equipped with cutting-edge design features and advanced weaponry inadvertently kept the initiative in German hands for a crucial period. It was a time marked by fierce contestation, where technological progress in one arena was often offset by the proliferation of equally sophisticated countermeasures elsewhere, creating a protracted battle of innovation and adaptation at sea. In the midst of these complex developments, the preservation and study of the Tetsi aircraft, a uniquely significant but highly classified military asset, proved to be an enduring challenge for historians and curators alike. This difficulty stemmed from the secretive nature of the program, which was shrouded in wartime confidentiality to prevent the enemy from gaining insights into its capabilities. As a result, most of these aircraft, once decommissioned or replaced, were either scrapped or returned to more conventional configurations, effectively erasing them from the physical record. The only remaining traces of this revolutionary weapon system are scattered photographs and technical drawings, which serve as vital, though incomplete, documentation of a design that briefly revolutionized maritime strike tactics. This scarcity of tangible artifacts means that modern understanding of the Tetsi's operational impact relies heavily on these rare visual and technical records, which underscore the aircraft's significance during its fleeting period of active service. Veterans who served within the ranks of the 248 Squadron often maintained informal gatherings, where discussions centered around the operational history of the Tetsi aircraft and its deployment during the war. These reunions, casual yet rich with first-hand accounts, have proved to be invaluable sources of historical insight. They provide detailed narratives about the aircraft's performance, its strategic employment, and the innovative tactics developed around its use. For decades, the true extent of the Tetsy's influence remained largely obscured from the public eye, concealed behind the veil of secrecy that cloaked military operations of that era. Only as the wartime classifications gradually expired did these stories begin to surface in official histories, painting a clearer picture of a weapon system that had, albeit briefly, transformed maritime warfare. The story of the Tetsy, therefore, is one of hidden potential finally revealed through the passage of time and the slow unlocking of classified information. The broader strategic implications of the Tetsy program extended far beyond its immediate operational successes. This initiative demonstrated that conventional weapon platforms, when intelligently adapted, could be effectively modified to address the emerging, complex tactical challenges posed by enemy submarines and surface vessels. Rather than investing solely in the development of entirely new aircraft, military planners recognized the value in reconfiguring existing designs to meet new threats. This approach proved to be both resource efficient and tactically versatile, influencing subsequent procurement strategies. As a result, armed forces around the world came to emphasize the importance of upgrading and modifying current platforms, rather than rushing into the creation of specialized, single-purpose aircraft that might become obsolete rapidly. The lessons learned from the Tetsy program underscored the strategic importance of flexibility, adaptability, and innovation within the broader context of wartime military planning. Contemporary military analysts examining the legacy of the Tetsy aircraft often draw parallels to today's anti-ship warfare strategies. Central to modern naval combat is the concept of standoff engagement, keeping hostile vessels at bay from a safe distance, an approach that enhances aircraft survivability and mission effectiveness. While the specific technology has evolved, with guided missiles now replacing the direct fire guns that briefly rendered the Mosquito aircraft capable of devastating enemy ships during the latter stages of the Second World War, the underlying principles remain consistent. The Tetsy's era demonstrated that the ability to strike from beyond enemy reach could dramatically shift the maritime balance of power, an insight that continues to shape modern naval tactics and weapon development programs. Today's guided missile systems, leveraging advanced targeting and autonomous guidance technology, serve as the modern evolution of the concept, keeping sailors and ships out of harm's way while maintaining the offensive edge against formidable maritime adversaries. The technological convergence exemplified by the Mosquito Tetsy, a melding of aircraft design, artillery systems, and industrial automation, epitomizes the spirit of innovation that defined Allied weapons development during the war. This era was characterized by resourcefulness and the willingness to explore unlikely combinations of existing technologies, resulting in capabilities that enemy forces could neither foresee nor counter effectively. The Tetsy aircraft, in particular, stood as a testament to the inventive potential of wartime engineering, a sophisticated integration of aeronautical design, guns, both large and small, and automation techniques that enabled it to perform its strike missions with remarkable